we will get started right away. I know we're still waiting on a number of people to come in, but I'm going to go ahead and ask everyone to answer my first poll question here, which is, how many employees do you have in your organization? And you can just chat it in with this group that we have. Chatting is totally fine. It will help me to understand better the size everyone is. So, are you less than 10? Do you have 11 to 25, 26 to 49, 50 to 99, 100 to 500, or more than 500? I'm guessing most are probably under 10 or under 25. So my next question for you is, who handles your human resource function today? And it may not even be a function yet. It may be that just when an HR issue comes up, who handles it? Is it the owner, the CEO of the company? Me, I love it. CFO, finance group. It's shared across the leadership team. Maybe it's your office manager, HR person. I see someone saying it's their HR, or nobody. we aren't doing that at all. So a lot of things help me understand a client or a prospect when I'm talking to them, because how many employees you have really dictates kind of the level of HR and the types of HR and the legal requirements of HR. So that's why I asked that. Who handles it helps me to know, is it a dedicated HR person that this is their background expertise and what they're brought in to do? Or is it filling somebody's plate because it has nowhere else to go? So it really helps me to better understand that. The challenges that you're running up against are another good way to talk and help understand someone when I'm talking to them. And then where do you see your business? So I can't really dive into that with every person today on the call, but I will kind of cover what might be some HR challenges that would trigger ideas for you, or things you might see in your business coming that would trigger, when do I need HR? What do I need in HR? So we'll still try to cover that quite a bit so that you have a good perspective when it happens for you, what you need to do. So this is my favorite way to talk to somebody about what in the world is human resources and what does this mean. I actually had this on the back of a napkin at one point because my parents, and we've been in business 26 years, still don't really understand what HR is. They're like, you hire people, you fire people. Robin, I got a neighbor whose daughter's in Alaska, needs a job. You can help her, right? So that's not necessarily what HR does, a little bit maybe. Typically what I say is it starts at the core, the company strategy. What is it you are in business to do? What are your goals for your business? And then how does your HR function align to that? Because it's really important to make sure, if you got a growth plan, we need to figure out how that's going to impact your people in all these areas. If you're looking at adding another division, growing your services, we need to look at all these areas. So for example, recruitment is literally, that's how you're going to get your new employees on board. So that could be everything from, how do I go about recruiting? Do I use job ads? Do I use my employee referrals? What do I ask people? How do I make offers to them? How do I know how much to make an offer for? Those are kind of the recruitment things you may run into. Training and development could be right away, the onboarding. What are you doing to make sure you're bringing employees on board effectively? It could be, harassment training, some of the compliance training you need to do, or it could even be performance reviews, career development. It all depends on how you want to help those employees. On the benefits and compensation, it's literally that. How are you going to pay them? How do you know how much to pay them? Is there any incentive comp? Should I offer benefits? A lot of times people think benefits are health insurance, and it's far more than that. It could be small things. It could be vision insurance. It could be a telehealth option, concierge services. There's lots of different things you can do, depending on your workforce, again, the size, the goals that you have for the business. Communication dives into that, because we never are told we over communicate. So employees are looking for that information from us. So it's important that we're able to provide that conversation with employees. It's your handbook. It's your policies and procedures that you set to help make sure that you're a success in setting kind of those guardrails for your employees. Employee relations is that difficult side where you may be doing discipline conversations. It may be issues you're running into with your employees, but it's also the good side. How do I keep these employees? And a lot of times we forget that is the employee relations, is retention. And with the job market the way it is right now, and it's hard to hire people, it's really important to be rehiring your current employees. So making sure that you're keeping an eye on what can you do to make sure your employees are happy and staying with you. A little bit more of that stress is that record keeping, all that stuff you got to have to be able to be functioning as an employer. So there's a lot of different records you need to retain, from onboarding and getting the I-9 and your tax forms to any other types of emergency response or emergency contact information, those types of things. And then COVID's kept the health, safety, and security part of HR really busy for the last 16 or 17 months, but it plays into all of those safety issues, wellness programs, COVID programs, security of the employees, those types of things. And then I always raise that gray band I have around the outside, the legal compliance. It kind of weaves in and out of everything I just told you to make sure we're staying in tow with local, state, and federal regulations. That's probably the hardest part I see with business owners. They want to be a little invincible and say those laws don't apply to me, but they do start early. This is a snapshot of our federal labor laws by the number of employees, and the link I have at the bottom lets you see it online. So you can go in and see kind of a snapshot based on the number of employees you have, what might be the laws that you need to be considering and looking at. But it's important to know from that first employee, you start having different regulations that you need to comply with. This is just federal. States and even municipalities have additional laws that you need to comply with. So it's important to know how many employees you have and know what laws may apply to you. The Fair Labor Standard Act is a good example of one that applies to everyone. You may have heard some of it where there was a lot of hustle and bustle about we were going to change the minimum wage, you're going to change the salary threshold. This is the law that mandates whether an employee is exempt or non-exempt. And you have to pay them a minimum of minimum wage, and you owe them for overtime. Those types of things come into play. If they make a certain salary, they may be able to be classified as exempt depending on their job duties. So that applies to all of us on this call. Discrimination, Title VII is another one in there that if you have 15 or more employees, you need to comply with. Age Discrimination Act is 20 or more employees. And if you start getting into some of the larger ones like Family Medical Leave Act, FMLA, that steps into some of the laws you have to do if you have 50 or more employees. So you can see that understanding the laws are really going to be important for you, as they will trigger things for you as you continue to grow. I always caution people, I love it, Richard, DE&I training, yes. It's definitely an area that needs to be a part of the HR function and top of mind. And I think we'll see even some of our legislating changing a little bit in the next few years to maybe be more supportive of DE&I. Make sure you're not trying to be your own attorney. I can't even be your attorney as an HR person. You want to make sure they're your strategic business partner. So how do you align yourself with an attorney in order to make sure if you have an issue come up that you can reach out to them when you need them? Again, as you're smaller, you probably don't have any of those needs right away, but just be sure you have that resource at your fingertips should something come up. So when do you need HR? Let's talk about that a little bit. When you start seeing HR related issues getting into the way of starting your business or running your business, that's probably time to bring in an HR expert. There really isn't a magic formula for it. The rule of thumb we often hear is 1 full-time HR professional to every 100 employees. If you're trying to be a best place to work or proactive or touch in every aspect of HR, I usually see that number more like 1 to 75. Many of you are under 10. I think one of you said you're 26 to 50. You're having HR issues. You just may not need a full-time 40-hour-week HR person, but you're having those issues. So at minimum, you want to be able to have those resources available to you when you start feeling any of those needs coming up. This could be, things to consider, like I said, it'll be who is doing it. What is their time worth? Do you want to continue to have that individual handling HR instead of what else they could be working on? What's important to you? What are the things you really want to drive home that your employees are getting the time and the attention for? And what do you want your HR person to do? Because there may be some things you want to stick with and have. So I'd say it's something that HR is something you need to be looking at all the time, but the level you may need will vary. You can't wait until you get big enough to need full-time to hit it. You need to be doing it early on so that you're ahead of the game and don't have any challenges as you run into it. So there's different stages where I see businesses really need to start paying attention to whether they need HR or not. And so this might help give you some triggers. And I'll just kind of give you some examples under each of these of when you might want to start saying, that's when I need to do it. So a startup phase is really, really critical. When you're kind of in a general startup, you need to make sure you've got workers' compensation set up, a payroll provider set up, the posters that you need to have around to make sure you're following federal and state poster requirements, employee files that you may need to have, I-9s. Those are some of the general things you might have in the startup until you're actually ready to hire. Once you're ready to hire under that employment section, it may be, what's your process going to look like to hire people? Do you need a job application? Do you have a description of the job that you're going to do? How are you going to go about finding those people? What's your solution going to be? And even creating tools like an interview guide or reference check form. How are you going to make sure you're doing those types of things that help you onboard, hire, and bring in those individuals that have the skills that are going to help your business? So that all falls under that employment section. When you hire, you obviously got to get into offer letters, onboarding programs, the forms that you may need to have filled out that are state required or federally required. Some states, Ohio is one of them, have new hire reporting requirements. So upon hire, there's pieces of that startup you may have that you need to be considering if you're going to have people on board. Compensation and pay, compensation structure would be something I've seen some get very formal with doing. Again, it depends on your size and if that's your focus, but at least knowing what the competition may be for those individuals that you're trying to attract. Where are they financially? How are you going to track time? You know, when employees work, what are you going to do to make sure you know what time they're working? How often are you going to pay them? So getting that payroll provider and setting up your payroll schedule, work schedules. How do you want to handle overtime? Do you want to make sure that they know what they can and can't do? And then in general, because when you hire, you now got to pay them, making sure your payroll system is working efficiently for you. The benefits is that next session, when you're starting up and getting employees, you are going to run into, especially in this job market, it can be tough to find people if you don't have some sort of benefits or perks to offer to them beyond compensation. And I get a lot of small businesses going, whoa, I can't afford that. So that's why I said early on, it may not just be health insurance. Think of other benefits you could do that might make you attractive. It may be even just thinking of the own things that would have attracted you or the employees you do have on board. What are they thinking? This could be things like any paid holidays you might offer. It could be a concierge service. It could be vision and dental insurance. Some of those things are really inexpensive. And even just having the vehicle for the employee and maybe not even paying for it, but being able to get the vehicle for them can also be really helpful. If you are going to go out and get health or dental or vision or any of those types of benefits, identifying a benefits broker, a benefits provider to work with is going to be important when you're looking at this stage. And also making sure as you offer benefits to employees, can't tell you how many times I've been talking with employees and they'll say, I didn't know we had that benefit. A benefit summary that you can give to your employees so they know what they're getting from working with you. And sometimes got to remind them too, because they'll get it when they're hired, but they may forget to go back and look and say, wow, I didn't know I could take advantage of, you know, getting reimbursed for getting a physical, so that it matches up my wellness initiatives. Naomi's offering a couple other there in the chat if you haven't looked at the chat, but meals for food service, preferential rates and other business things like your gym memberships, mobile services, Costco's. I mean, there's lots of things that you can offer that give them the vehicle of having that group rate. So definitely things to look at. The last area I have on here is policies, procedures, forms. It is very important to have a handbook. If you have one, you want it to be up to date and correct. So making sure it's setting those guide rails for you to help you manage your employees and have a go-to. Kind of takes you being the bad person when an employee comes to you and has a question or an issue. You can go, well, what's our handbook say? So it makes it a little easier for you. Are you having an introductory period? Some people have it, some people don't. Do you have a form whenever you need to make any type of change for an employee, like a personnel action form? How about how are you going to do performance evaluations? Thinking about that. And again, making sure you're following any state-specific laws that you may be running into because of what you're doing and the type of business you're in. Those are all things that are really important for you to be thinking about in that startup stage. And after you've been in startup, you probably will have a lot of these things already in place and it'll make it run a lot more smoothly for you rather than waiting. And I see a lot of organizations hire a person and then go, oh my gosh, how much should I pay them? They just, you know, we're ready to make an offer or they want benefits. What benefits do I have available? So making sure you're doing them ahead of time will just make life so much easier for you when you start bringing those employees on board. After the startup phase are still a number of other triggers that will tell you, gosh, I probably need HR. So I've tried to capture some of these, again, challenges you may run into that say, it's probably time for me to do it. So I may have done the startup, but now I got to really think about what else do I need to do. So if your business is going through growth or you're adding staff, HR can help you develop a successful recruitment campaign and be involved in helping you hire as you need them, even if it's simply creating the tools for you to be successful. Alternatively, if you're having a downturn or maybe experiencing quite a bit of turnover, this is another time we've had people say, gosh, I need HR help. I need to understand better why people are leaving. I need to establish some programs to help address these concerns and help improve my culture. And with COVID, it's really created many of those types of issues that we don't even know exist. If you're working remotely, you can't see or hear as easily if people are remote on some of those challenges they may be having that could impact turnover for you. There was an alarming survey I just saw the other day that said 52% of our current employees are actively looking for another job right now in 2021. I don't know about you, but I can't afford to lose 50% of my employees. So making sure you're ahead of that game if you're seeing some inclinations that turnover may be an issue. You may also see that you need to get more formalized. So as you're going through and your business is growing, getting better organized with your processes and your procedures may not need as much at the beginning because there's 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 of you. But the bigger you get, the easier it's going to be if you have some of those processes and procedures in place to create consistency. Consistency in HR operations, but also so that you're not looking at all like you're discriminating against somebody just because you're just offering the services the way you have them set up at the current time. So making sure that you are keeping a close eye on that. In this crazy job market, labor market, you want to be competitive with others. So it's a really good time to be offering some of those perks and benefits that are going to help you to attract and retain. So I've seen that be another flag when people say, oh, I'm not competitive. People keep turning us down. So HR can help you really look at what can you do to make yourself stand out. I've had a number of clients I've been working with, and I'll say, well, why would someone want to work for you? And I literally get, I wouldn't want to do this job. I'm like, wait a minute, you're trying to attract people. What do we need to do to get them to go, wow, I want that job and I want to work there. That's where you really need to start thinking about and possibly pull in HR to help you with that. Change, and gosh, I don't know when we're not experiencing a lot of change, but this is again another time that you really want to maybe thinking about what HR can do to help you. A time when there's a lot of uncertainty, unrest in your business, maybe experiencing quite a bit of conflict at work that's hindering people's performance. This can be another indicator that you might need some more people side strategies. And I feel like I just described our last 16 months, but a lot of that change is always happening in the HR space. So it's just as important to make sure you're paying attention to that. Another big one I have on here is conflict. So if you're working in your organization, you feel like, gosh, just seems like there's a lot of conflict either maybe with the owner and the manager, or maybe the managers and the employees. Things are getting in the way of helping you work cohesively as a team, and maybe you need to find ways to resolve some of that conflict. Answering who manages who. I had a client that had 2 partners. And when they started getting busy, they never really specified what this partner did versus this partner. So there was a lot of times they were even duplicating each other or butting up against each other. So again, thinking of something like that is really important to help you be able to be ready for that. Let's see, if you're getting a little bit more into the compliance side of things, we really need to be paying attention to those laws. I have had one of my first questions I always ask people is, are you collecting I-9s within 3 days and ensuring they're completed correctly? It's the basic thing that you need to do from a compliance side with employee number 1, but you'd be surprised how many employees do not do I-9 forms. I had an employer the other day that's been in business since 1976 and hasn't done it. Good news is they never got busted for it. Bad news is they really needed to have them there, because you don't want to get that fine for just not having an I-9 form in place. That's an easy way to help your business stay out of that kind of trouble. Any kind of business crisis you might be going through is another time, whether you're doing furloughs, layoffs, maybe it's bringing employees back. With COVID, you have people refusing to come to work, talking about exposure. Do I mandate the vaccine? Do I let people take their masks off? All of those types of things are triggers that, now would be a good time for me to get some HR help. I try to provide as many situations, since we don't have that dialogue about what's your challenge. What are some of those business factors that might be a warning sign for you to, it's time to kind of look at what I might be doing or what I might need. I always bring up the laws because the laws is a really big trigger. We mentioned this a minute ago. This gives you a few more of the laws that hit, I think 50 employees is a step where a lot of people say, gosh, what happens when I hit 50? Those of you that were 10 and under, not as important. Those that were the next slide bigger, your Family Medical Leave Act, being able to allow employees to leave for qualified reasons and have that up to 12 weeks of unpaid time off. Affordable Care Act, making sure you're providing benefits and doing the reporting. As you get up to 100 employees, you would have EEO1 and affirmative action laws that you need to comply with. Again, just making sure you keep an idea on it. You want to keep a pulse on where are you from a legal side and what do you need to be doing to make sure you're protecting you personally as an owner as well as your business. So I've given you ideas of symptoms. So think of your car and the warning light goes off and is yellow. Those are symptoms that might make you go, I got an itch that I think I probably need help. So what are your options? We have a number of different things that we can do as business owners when we think, gosh, I might need HR help. And I'm going to share some of these with you, try to share pros and cons, benefits, costs to help you know when you get that itch or that issue, you know what choices that you have. So we'll talk about internal solutions, a PEO, a professional employers organization, and outsourcing. So it gives you a couple of different things to consider as you're looking for it. The first one, internal. This obviously could be the most logical. Gosh, if I just hire an employee to handle HR, how would that work? That is definitely an option that you have. So there's things to think about from a consideration side. Do you need the person full-time or part-time? If you're still 10 employees or even under 50 employees, part-time is more than enough unless you're going to combine other duties with that person. The skill range you'll have if you're hiring an HR person internally could be someone administrative, like an HR coordinator. I've seen in smaller business that person may be your office manager that has HR and finance. But again, making sure they have that HR experience and knowledge if you're going to an internal HR person. Do you need somebody that's more senior level and strategic? So I've seen the gamut from that coordinator to the director. Are the things that you need to rely on that person more the day-to-day HR issues? Or is it a little more strategic, like where are we going and how do we make sure our employees have the right skills to be ready for tomorrow? Then it might be the strategic, or it might be both. So again, helps you to look at what type of HR person would I need. I have specialists or generalists on here because a specialist is probably going to be focused on payroll or benefits or a niche recruiting versus a generalist is going to be someone that's going to be able to do most everything HR that you may have a need for. Cost, it is all over the place. That's why I want to give you a range. So you might be able to get a coordinator somewhere in that 30,000 range. If you get a director, you're easily over 100K. If you're getting a full-time HR manager with a small emerging business, you probably can get someone in that maybe 60 to 75,000 if they're full-time. So think of that if they're part-time. There are definitely consultants or individuals out there that want to work as a part-time HR person. So it's definitely realistic, especially someone that may be a stay-at-home mom or dad that says, you know what, if I could work 9 to 3, that may be perfect for you to get an HR person that can just have shorter hours on each day. Things to think about beyond that, they become the keeper of your culture. So while you're trying to grow, emerge, keep your mind on everything, making sure this person is an idea, a finger on the pulse of what our employees thinking and feeling ahead of, is there any issues percolating that we need to address? They're going to be the one responsible for that whole people aspect of your business and making sure they understand anything at all that might involve the employees. This person's going to be making sure people know clearly what's expected of them of performance, how you're going to provide that feedback. They're going to anticipate any change issues that may be coming about, and how do we make sure we communicate those change issues to employees ahead of time so we don't create any kind of panic. For example, I know right now when in Ohio, DeWine came out and said, you know, CDC has a new mandate, June 2nd, here's what we're going to do. Everybody went into panic again. It was all good news, but everybody kind of went into panic. Like, do I have to wear my mask? Should I make my employees wear a mask? So making sure that that person's on top of any change that may impact employees. And in general employee management, this could be scheduling. This could be making sure that they're getting one-on-ones with their managers, anything like that. Even getting into the conflict management. So if you are tiptoeing up to 70 employees or 100 at some point in the future, you definitely want to be thinking about, is it time to hire someone inside? It may end up being that you do a combination of the solutions I'm offering to you. So helping you understand a little bit better the differences, I think will help you a little bit better know when you feel that itch, what should you do? So let's talk about with the internal persons. Let's say you decide, it skipped a slide on me, sorry. No, if you want to outsource it. What exactly do I mean when I say outsource it? This is when you engage in someone outside the organization to become your HR person, and they're providing that HR support of the wheel that we described when you need it. So you weren't necessarily hiring somebody on your payroll 20 hours a week. You're using someone that's going to be available for you when you need it. And you really set up that relationship with them. Types of the parts of the HR function I often see an outsourced group work with could be, like getting your people, the recruiting and onboarding them. I often do see it now. The next step is we got to make sure they're getting the right benefits and answering benefits questions and getting paid. So you might see an outsourced person do that. That piece of coaching you as the owner, your managers through issues they may be working with their employees. They may have a high potential employee and not know what to do, or they may have an employee with an attendance problem. So helping managers navigate those conversations as a coaching situation. Likewise, employees. They also are the one that's going to help you when you're looking at workplace compliance. What are the laws that are applying to me? What's changing right now? What do I need to be on top of? So that's what the outsourced person could do for you. Generally speaking, that HR consultant should have a depth of expertise so they can fill in anywhere that you need HR help. The cost, you're going to see everything from maybe $75 an hour to up to as high as $200 or more an hour. Definitely just depends again on what pieces of HR you need them to do, maybe how many hours a week or a month you might need them will help dictate kind of where you'll land on that hourly rate. The difference is the consultant is doing what you need versus the internal person is going to be with you, whatever hours you establish with them every week. So different strengths. If you want to have the internal person maybe be the coordinator and the external person be that strategist. Again, there's different ways you can combine these different options depending on your organization and what you need the most. A lot of times you don't need to pay for a full-time person if you can go this option. The last one is what we call a PEO, or Professional Employers Organization. Let's see if I can just get it all up for you. So a PEO basically, your employees become an employee of the Professional Employer Organization, a PEO. That way they can handle all of the HR administration for your employees, everything from payroll processing, and these are kind of the key reasons why you would go with a PEO is for payroll processing, health insurance administration. They can provide that health insurance solution to you that you may not have been able to get because of your size. Unemployment and workers' compensation. Typically, the PEO is going to provide that for you as well. Their policies and procedures. So the benefit of a PEO is they may have 3 or 4 companies, they may have hundreds of companies that are all part of their organization as a PEO. So your benefits and all the things you get the economies of scale by being a part of that PEO, rather than trying to go get benefits for yourself with 10 employees. Being a part of the PEO, you can get benefits because they may be all told 1,000 employees with all the different businesses they're working with. So a lot of times those are considerations people will think of. I can get a payroll provider, but between payroll administration and health insurance and workers' comp, I really think I want to outsource some of that to a PEO. Your employees do become an employee of the PEO and they're leased back to you. So there is a co-employment issue there. And we often also see those fees are going to be a fee per employee, depending on the PEO provider, as well as what services you're asking the PEO for. Some will be all inclusive of everything HR, and that would be your fee. And some may just be pieces of the HR function. And so your fee may vary because of that. Get all those. Pay attention to what I've already got on my slides. So I also get people asking me exactly when should I think about doing a PEO or not do a PEO? I don't know how many times I get asked that question. So the reasons you would do it is it takes that administrative level of HR off your plate, because the PEO is going to handle most of your HR operations for you. Again, I mentioned the health insurance and workers' compensation, those things that make it easier because you're in a group of people rather than your small business. You take on less risk because you're in a co-employer situation. So they oftentimes have attorneys on staff they can provide to you. They're more on top of, or I shouldn't say more, they're on top of those legal issues. But they do become the legal entity for hiring and firing and taxes and payroll. They're the ones managing that, but working as a co-employer with you to do that. So it helps you in some of those regards. Reasons I've seen people not go to a PEO, they don't like the idea of leasing their employees. They want their employees to be their employees. Almost kind of a branding. If you've got a proud employment brand culture, having your employees get a paycheck from another organization, I've had people say it doesn't feel right. I've seen some PEOs with their operation that you may be 10 employees, but they're 1,000. So now you got to comply with the laws of 1,000 employee organization. So those are questions I usually tell people to ask because I've seen it handled different ways. They often are purely administrative, so you're not necessarily going to get that strategic side with a PEO. They're going to do your payroll administration, your benefits administration. They're not necessarily going to do that strategic side of helping you with your business, nor some of them do the employee relations side. So be able to help guide you and coach your managers. Some do, but some don't. And then you typically, from a control side, you get the benefits the PEO offers, you get the payroll solution the PEO offers, employee programs. So a lot of things are tailored to what you're buying in to be a part of that PEO's business. So again, it gives you some really, really good options to be able to consider. I'm going to recap it and then see if I can answer it. Ella has a question here. So let me go ahead and move to the next slide, and then I'm going to try to answer your question, Ella, because it might answer it. You need to really find out when you have that itch at first, it's time to think about HR. What HR needs to be for you is what's most important. That could be today, that could be tomorrow. You need to be able to show you're paying attention to it. The number of employees, the laws that apply to you are things you need to be paying attention to. What's going on in your business? We talked about various challenges. And then looking at these options that to hire a person, outsource, or PEO. So an example of a company that would use a PEO manufacturing or service. I'm trying to think of an example that I have right off the top of my head. I had a small business that had about 10 employees, and they did not have anybody at all in HR. It was the owner, and they're really trying to decide, do I want to keep having to manage the payroll, the benefits, and all this? So for them, they felt it was easier at the size that they were to go to the professional employer organization, the PEO, so that administration kind of went off their plate and went onto the PEO. You still have some role because you're paying the bills for the PEO, so you want to be involved in what they're doing. But at that point where you really say, I just don't want that administrative burden of having the PEO, and really that applies whether you're manufacturing or service organization. It's really looking at, again, some of those for or against a PEO reasons why you would or wouldn't want to do it. And it really takes kind of sitting down and processing, why are you looking for HR help, and what do you think you'll get out of the PEO versus the HR? So it was a good question, Ella. I don't know if I answered it entirely for you, but I wanted to make sure I give you ideas to think about. Everybody is a little bit different. So when you're looking at your business, making sure you understand to be aware when that itch comes, don't stop. Making sure you're staying on top of those challenges that are really getting in the way, because you don't want your business to get impacted if there's something sitting there as simple as being able to get that HR help to help you get there. If you've never sat down and said, wow, I've got 10 employees, what does that mean? I would definitely encourage you from a legal side, what does that mean for you? Are you doing everything you need to be doing from a federal and state requirements to make sure you're doing what you need to do? And as I said, this is a lot of a program that I actually do more for someone coming to me as a business owner. So it's more two-way engagement. So we can open up to questions and have some live discussion on this, because I think that'll help you as we discuss it now that you kind of have the framework of what HR looks like, when you might need it, as well as what are some solutions for you. So I would really like to take on any questions people have.